And welcome back to the Two Words Podcast, where our 2 words today is group project. That's right, we're talking about factions. The best factions, the worst factions, and who has too many or too little of them. Factions always seem to they can really make or break. Mm-hmm. And if you do them right, they can really make people. But if you do them wrong, you almost somehow can bury 4 pieces of talent at one time.
And likely get a couple of them fired.
Yeah, I mean...
Because someone's got to be blamed for it.
Yeah, and usually it's like all 4 of them. And somehow, I think a big part of the problem, especially in WWE, is that they just immediately buried people that they put together.
Yeah, they don't... They make a big deal about these factions coming together, and then they don't push them correctly. And then when they're not received correctly because of that, they blame the faction as a whole. Like, nope, this was a bad idea. These people don't work well together.
Yeah.
Let's break up the Hurt Business for no reason, and then put them back together a few months later, and then break them up again for no reason.
Yeah, and, in looking at my list of best and worst... 2 of the worst factions wasn't even really their fault, because I have the League of Nations.
I also have them on here.
Yeah, League of Nations was awful, but it shouldn't have been.
Right.
League of Nations was a group of talent, monster talent.
Every single one of them, absolutely.
But almost immediately they were mid-carded. Or they became the jokes of the butts of the segments or whatever.
Yeah, I think Sheamus had the world title for a hot second.
I think literally like a week,
and then they were mid carded after that, which is a big bummer. But it did really feel like, we don't know what to do with all these characters, and they all have accents. So let's make up a team.
let's
anti-American team. That's what it was.
That's really what it is. But you had Rusev, and you had
Wade Barrett,
and
Sheamus, and who's the 4th one?
Who's the 4th?
Wow,
Alberto Del Rio.
Oh, that's right, Alberto Del Rio. I forgot about it.
Alberto Del Rio was the least talented person. Well, I don't know about that, but he was the least likable person in that group. But
all of them were great.
Yeah, all of them were great. The social outcasts, I think, was the same thing.
I got that on here too. Yeah.
Heath Slater and Adam Rose and Curtis Axel, who Curtis Axel may actually be taking a producer spot with WWE. He had a producer tryout.
Oh, okay.
One of his segments. I'll have to go rewatch that segment, but could be exciting.
Felt like kind of a knockoff of 3MB. I think it was too close to 3MB.
It might have been.
And people liked 3MB, or at least we like 3MB.
Yeah, I like 3MB. But it was like they put them together, and it was immediately like, hey, how stupid are these guys?
Yeah. Bo Lee.
You put Bo Dallas, and at that time you put Bo Dallas into anything, and it's gonna be rough. Another one of my least favorites, the Mean Street Posse.
Yeah, I got them on here too.
Who watched the Mean Street Posse and was like, this was a good idea. This is Attitude Era at its best.
They had some comedic value, but the original 2 guys had 0 wrestling training at all. The 3rd guy they eventually brought in, Joey or whatever his name was, it was a wrestler, but this caused them to be reckless, and they actually caused a few injuries too, because they didn't know what they were doing. Didn't even know how to pull punches.
No.
So people didn't want to work with them. And that's why they were pretty much relegated to hardcore matches, which is essentially 24/7 championship matches.
Which is hilarious that guys that group of guys and those characters of guys were like, oh, we put them in hardcore matches. That's what we're gonna do. Probably the worst faction of all time, the Dungeon of Doom.
Okay.
I mean, they had one goal, and it was to destroy Hulk Hogan, and they failed miserably. It was Kevin Sullivan at his absolute worst booking. One of them was dressed like a shark, right? It was.
I forgot. Oh gosh,
it was, it was all the worst. The guys in the worst shape.
Yeah,
none of them were in very good shape. and they're, and then they were trying to do like the cinematic stuff with like, Hulk Hogan in a cave and he's, being kidnapped or whatever. Like, yeah, it was some.
What's going on, brother?
What's going on, brother?
What's with all this smoke, brother?
Dude. Also, when they tried to reboot, sometimes you have a great tag team or great group like the Legion of Doom that turns into a bad group like the Legion of Doom 2000 where they wore welders masks and they added Draws and Sunny.
And then they had that terrible alcoholism, suicide gimmick.
That turned into real life. So that's the thing. And I have one faction that I say is on my worst, but I don't think it's their fault. The Butcher, the Blade, and the Bunny.
Yeah.
I like these three wrestlers. I like the look they have. I like everything about them. I just don't like that they're on this same show as the Dark Order.
Yeah, I agree.
And that they get almost like, I love the idea of like them being mercenaries and kind of hitmen, like MJF's kind of not really lackeys, but like the guy, working for him and that sort of stuff. I just think it's a little too close to Dark Order, and like Dark Order steals the show.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Do you have any other just terrible factions?
I got a few more here. X Factor. This was
X Factor,
X-Pac's new stable after DX finally disintegrated, where he joined up with Albert and Just Incredible. I think
the article I read was, what if I told you that Jeff Hardy once got beat up by Just Incredible and Prince Albert? Like,
any faction Albert was in was awful. Any tag team, anything, and any of his variations as well. What was the latest one? Tensai, yeah. That was weird.
The Super Shredder.
Always been weird. I got the Job Squad. I think the idea was great, like mid undercarders joining forces, but it showed you how unnecessary it was when they finally let Al Snow and Bob Holly off the leash, because they became like the draws for the Hardcore Championship for a while. Like they were I wanted to watch their matches more than many of the main events back then. We got Cosmic Wasteland from Cody Rhodes. Cody Rhodes as Stardust. With the Ascension, which is the LOD ripoffs.
Gosh, I forgot they did that.
And they had one feud with Neville and Stephen Amell, Green Arrow. And then they were done.
I remember that.
And my last one is kind of a sad one. Like, you remember, I don't remember what the name of the stable was called, but for a little while there was Cody Rhodes, Randy Orton, and some other guy.
Ted DiBiase Jr. in Legacy.
Legacy, that's what it was. Legacy. Well, there was a similar faction in TNA called the Next Generation.
Okay.
This was Brian Lawler, Jerry the King Lawler's son.
Yeah.
Eric Watts, son of Bill Watts, and David Flair, the late David Flair, son of Ric Flair. This was a very similar. Oh, they all, yeah.
Two of them are.
Two of them. You're right. I forgot. But anyway, this.
Oh, that's not why it was sad.
That's not why it was sad.
Oh man,
no, that's why it was sad. But
it's about to get really.
But the reason
sad.
it was bad was because they brought out these characters banking on the names of their fathers as the idea of the faction, and they had a fraction of the ability and the charisma, and it was the biggest nothing burger faction that was built up to be something huge.
Yeah.
In my memory. Yeah.
TNA had another one. Magnificent Seven. No, WCW had Magnificent Seven.
Okay, yeah, I was about to say.
And it was like Sting and Scott. It was just a bunch of old dudes.
Yeah.
And
there was the old age Outlaws. You remember that? That Vince Russo put together in WCW as a real thing.
Yeah. That's
terrible. Outlaws.
That's terrible. So as far as like best factions though, I mean, there's almost too many to count.
Yeah, we've talked about quite a few, or at least a few of them here in the last several weeks. with like NWO and DX.
Yeah, you know, NWO though, what's funny is you could put them on the best and then also the worst.
Oh, absolutely.
Because there's basically two versions of the same faction.
But if you look at it as just those main three guys before it got super out of hand, like it changed wrestling forever. And
yeah, I mean, had they stayed at just the original three, added six, or added six?
That was his name, yeah. X-Pac.
Okay.
X-Pac.
I can't remember if it was
X-Pac.
six or sticks. They added six, and then there was one guy they added right after that.
I don't remember who.
If they had kept it at like a 4 or 5 man faction, it would have been really, really fun.
I agree. Yeah, if they kept it relatively small.
DX, I've loved. I genuinely actually love every version of DX, and I love Shawn Michaels. I mean, I'm just that's my guy. You know. Are we just gonna? Does X-Pac make factions? Is that what? Is that what it is?
X-Pac is better in a team.
X-Pac is fantastic.
He's not great in a vacuum by himself. But in a team,
DX changed with the product.
It did, yeah.
Because like they would have never put the original DX on, you know, in the Universal era as they call it.
Right.
And so they're like, okay, we'll just kind of change it up. Mm-hmm. I liked the Spirit Squad.
You like the Spirit Squad?
I like. So it's one of those when you look at it from a perspective of like,
can't just come in here and say that.
You have to have a bad guy that is just unbelievably hateable.
Okay.
They nailed it.
Okay, I would agree with you in the fact that everyone hated them because they were supposed to.
Yeah.
Like they were the Miz of this situation. Like that you were supposed to not like them being on the screen. And so they did have that chemistry for that.
I think they did their job well.
I agree. I would agree with that. And we got Dolph Ziggler out of it.
And we got Dolph Ziggler. Nikki!
I've got we already talked about Evolution. Evolution is on here, but you know, they represent dominance in my eyes. But I got the Inner Circle on here, the first big heel faction at AEW.
Yeah.
I think that was a great faction to start off the promotion with because you automatically had established villains because of that. And, of course, anything that Chris Jericho touches that way, that sounded inappropriate. Anything Chris Jericho is a part of like that is okay by me. Fine in my book.
Yeah. Gonna go to TNA.
Ooh.
Aces and Eights.
Okay.
Let's just talk about how Aces and Eights might be the best thing that ever happened in TNA. They had great chemistry. They were able to tell really good stories. Every member of Aces and Eights was really good. They were a biker gang without being like a weird biker gang. Like they wore leather, but it wasn't like weird leather, you know? Like they weren't all dressed like a village person.
They wore leather, but it wasn't,
it wasn't like a weird leather, kind of like
a fun leather.
There was less rings and chains and such. Because like I said, I really like everything that Bully Ray puts together.
Yeah. If I'm remembering correctly, it was like there were 4 guys in that, right? And 2 sets of them looked exactly the same. Like there were 2 bald guys with goatees and 2 long-haired guys with goatees.
I know that it was Bully and Devon.
Devon was in there too?
I think he was, wasn't he?
I don't remember. Maybe I might be thinking of a different group then.
You forget that it almost turned into like an NWA thing or NWO thing. Bully Ray, Garrett Bischoff, and Taz.
Oh, okay. I'm thinking of a completely different group. I apologize.
Devon and D-Lo were...
D-Lo?
D-Lo Brown was in there.
I didn't even know D-Lo was in there anymore.
Yeah, D-Lo Brown was in there.
I didn't even know D-Lo went to TNA.
Yep. Mr. Anderson was in.
Wow.
Tito Ortiz.
Okay, so it did become a big thing. I'm remembering that now.
Leva Bates, who you'll remember, became Blue Pants. That was fun. And on Wikipedia, there's just a guy named Mike.
It's Mike.
Mikey Mike.
All right, I got the Wyatt family. I really like.
Oh man,
I really like cultish kind of factions of that nature, and this one had. I mean, this one could have gone a lot farther. It had a lot of potential to keep going. I mean, I don't hate what they did with the Fiend and the kind of Mr. Rogers, Bray Wyatt character. I mean, I really liked that storyline, but I still hate that it was at the expense of Bray Wyatt and the Wyatt family.
Had it always been the plan to go back to the Wyatt family, I would not have hated the Fiend. And I don't hate the Fiend. To say I hated the Fiend was a bad thing to say. But yeah, and they did horror really good. Mm-hmm. Like they were the last ones that did like the weird and horror very well.
And this is the problem with the Wyatt family. Why the Wyatt family, I think, in my eyes, failed is because they kept booking them to lose. They kept booking them as this big overarching villain, and then by the time the pay-per-view came, they would always lose. I think the biggest waste of the Wyatt family and Bray Wyatt's character there was having him lose to The Undertaker. I thought that build-up of the new face of fear would be the perfect passing of the torch to who would become the new Undertaker, who would become the new face of fear, but instead, they didn't. Said they're like, let's just drill a nail in this coffin. A Bray Wyatt will never be the next Undertaker.
Yeah, I think that the biggest problem with the Wyatt family was realized when Brody Lee went to the Dark Order, because the Dark Order is on my list, because the Dark Order is, in a company full of factions that have no purpose, as I've said before.
Yeah.
In AEW, they are a step above everybody, and that's mostly because of Brody Lee's whatever
legacy. I don't know.
Yeah, it's because of his
influence.
Because of his influence. Yeah, because of his. Because of what he gave.
He didn't actually get to be in the faction for all that long.
No.
But for the time that he was in it did see a fundamental shift in how that stable performed. And I'm kind of mad at myself for not putting them on my list as well, but I'm glad you did.
But you can kind of see what the Wyatt family could have become.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like, oh, you could have let that guy talk too.
Right.
Like hillbillies that can talk like that? Are you kidding me? Let's go.
I've got the corporate ministry on here. I think that this kind of suffered from NWO syndrome in that it had way too many members, but it was awesome to see this weird, dark, spiritual yet corporate entity in control of the WWE for a little while. Like it was almost video game-esque, where there's like this secret corporation that's actually run by demons, or something like that. Like that, it had that real kind of sci-fi-ish feel to it. I really liked that.
Yeah.
And I have one more.
Yeah, go ahead.
You want me to do my last one?
Yeah.
My last one's the Bullet Club. I think also NWO syndrome, but the initial Bullet Club faction that kind of started with New Japan, but then became like this major, massive indie circuit hype factory. It was like creating a legend in real time. Like, I think you mentioned this before on the podcast, like people were buying the shirts at Hot Topic, had no idea who the people were, aren't even wrestling fans, but it became like this cultural phenomenon just by the fact that they were like, hey, we're going to do this without any of the big name brands. And that was kind of like the first seeds to building AEW, building the Elite, which I think was very poetic.
The thing that kept Bullet Club from becoming an NWO thing was that they didn't really add people until someone left.
That's true. It did at least stay around like 10 or less.
Yeah, like Prince Fergus or Fergal or whatever they were calling him in New Japan, Finn Balor. He didn't take over until AJ Styles was gone from the company.
Correct.
And Jay White didn't really take over until somebody else was gone from the company.
Yeah.
So I think I think that they that's how they've avoided that. And last on my list, I don't think we can talk about factions without talking about the original faction, and that would be the Four Horsemen.
Love it.
I mean, and they set a blueprint. They set that evolution blueprint, kind of. You know, you had your super talent, you had your great speaker, and in Ric Flair, and you had your heavies with Arn and Ole Anderson, and you had Tully Blanchard, and over the years, there were different guys in there, but you always look at every version of the Four Horsemen, and you're like, that's a good group of dudes. Even when Dean Malenko and
Perry Saturn.
I think Perry Saturn was a horseman. The Rabid Wolverine we were just talking about.
Oh, the guy that must not be named. I can't think of his name automatically either. Chris Benoit. There we go.
Benoit.
What a brain brick wall we had right there. I forgot that he was in that too.
So I loved that.
And I think one of the defining things about that too is that was long before our era. That was long before we started watching. I think maybe before you were even born when that was first established. Or really close. Anyway, it's such a lasting concept because they've continued to tease, groups of four teaming up as a Four Horsemen-esque thing. We've had that with, the Four Horsewomen thing, which never really, materialized, but was constantly teased. And there's several pictures of all four of them, Charlotte Flair, Sasha Banks, Becky Lynch, and Bayley doing the four symbol. Like we had it with the Radicals, which had two of them that were in there, but that was also a kind of Four Horsemen-esque teased thing. Yeah. Like every era of factions where we get a team of four, they're always compared to the Four Horsemen. Yeah. And that is just as big of a legacy as anything left by NWO or DX or any of these newer quote unquote, but any of the ones that followed. Yeah. So I absolutely agree they belong on that list. Yeah.
Well, those are our list of favorites and worst. Did we miss any? Do you think we left somebody off the list that should have been given the list? Well, head over to our socials at 2 words LTN. That's any social media you want to gripe at us on, and we are there. Head on over there and let us know what you think. Thank you for tuning in.